Hello. Tonight we are going to explore a quiet question: why some periods of history appear clearer to us, while others feel distant, silent, or blurred. It is a thought that often comes to mind when we look at the vast timeline of human existence and realize how much of it remains in shadow. If you are listening to this as you prepare for sleep, let your mind settle into the rhythm of the words. There is no need to memorize these details or feel a sense of urgency. History is like a long, slow conversation that began long before we arrived, and much of what was said has simply drifted away with the wind. We often think of history as a book with every page intact, but it is more like a collection of fragments. Some chapters are illuminated with bright light, while others are barely more than a faint outline. This isn't usually the result of a plan or a secret. It is simply the way time interacts with the things humans leave behind. The clarity we feel about a certain era usually starts with the materials people used to record their lives. Imagine, if you will, the difference between a message carved into a heavy stone and one written on a thin piece of dried leaf. One is built to endure, while the other is destined to return to the earth. In ancient Egypt, for example, the records we have are often remarkably clear because they were literally carved into the earth. The stone walls of temples and tombs were meant to last for eternity, and because the climate was dry and stable, those records stayed exactly where they were placed. We can see the names of rulers and the accounts of their lives because stone is patient. Then we have Mesopotamia, where the people used clay. They pressed their thoughts into wet clay tablets, and in many cases, those tablets were baked by fire, sometimes accidentally during a conflict, which turned them into ceramic. Because clay is so durable once it is hardened, we can still read the mundane details of their daily lives, the trade of grain, the laws of the city, and the stories they told one another. When a civilization uses durable materials, history feels high resolution. We feel as though we are standing right next to them. But as we move forward or backward in time, the materials change. As civilizations developed more efficient ways to write, moving toward papyrus, parchment, or paper, the records became easier to create, but also much easier to lose. Paper can burn, it can rot in the damp, and it can be eaten by insects. This is why some centuries feel like they are missing information. It isn't that nothing was happening, it is just that the medium of their memory was fragile. Many historians believe that we have lost far more than we have found, simply because of the natural cycle of decay. Beyond the materials themselves, the stability of a society plays a huge role in what survives. When a period is peaceful and prosperous, people have the time and the resources to keep records. They build libraries, they train scribes, and they maintain archives. In these times, the signal of history is strong. However, history is also marked by migrations, economic declines, and shifts in power. When a city is abandoned or a government changes, the archives are often forgotten. During times of great movement or struggle, people focus on survival rather than record keeping. They carry what they can in their minds: stories, poems, and traditions. But the written evidence becomes thin. Oral tradition is a beautiful but delicate way that history is preserved. For many generations, humans relied on memory to pass down the most important truths of their culture. While these stories are rich and deeply meaningful, they tend to change slowly over time, softening the edges of specific dates and names until the history feels more like a poem or a legend. This is why some periods feel blurry. They were kept alive in the hearts of people rather than on the surface of a wall. We also see gaps in history when there is a shift in language or writing systems. If a culture stops using a certain script, the records they left behind might sit in plain sight for 1,000 years, unread and misunderstood, until someone finds a way to translate them again. For a long time, the history of certain civilizations felt like a void, not because the records were gone, but because we had lost the key to their language. It's important to remember that gaps are a normal part of the human story. We don't know everything, and we likely never will. There are vast stretches of time where we have only a few clues, a handful of coins, a broken piece of pottery, or a line in a poem from a neighboring land. Instead of feeling frustrated by these silences, we can view them with a sense of calm reflection. They remind us that history is a living thing, and our understanding of it is always evolving. A new archaeological find, like a buried structure or a forgotten cache of scrolls, can suddenly bring a blurry period into sharp focus. But even then, there will always be more to discover. As you listen, you might think about your own life and the records you leave behind. Much of our daily experience is ephemeral. Conversations with friends, the feeling of the sun on our skin, the thoughts we have before falling asleep. These things are deeply real, even if they aren't carved in stone for future historians to find. In the same way, the unclear periods of history were filled with people who lived, loved, and worked, even if their names have drifted out of the record. They were just as real as we are. Their silence in the history books doesn't mean their lives were any less significant. It simply means that time has a way of being selective about what it holds on to. The world has seen many cycles. Cultures rise, they adapt, they move, and they change. Sometimes they leave behind great monuments that tell a clear story for thousands of years. Other times, they leave only a quiet legacy that lives on in the way we speak or the customs we follow today, without us even realizing where they came from. There's a peace in accepting that some things remain unknown. We don't need to fill every gap with a theory or a struggle. We can simply appreciate the fragments we do have. We can be grateful for the dry, desert air that preserved the papyrus, for the fire that hardened the clay, and for the monks and scholars who spent their lives copying old texts so they wouldn't be lost to time. History is a vast, quiet landscape. When we look back, we see the mountain peaks clearly, but the valleys are often filled with mist. As we drift closer to sleep, we can let that mist be. We don't need to see through it tonight. We are part of that same landscape, a small point on a very long line. There is a comfort in knowing that we are part of a story that is so much larger than ourselves, a story that continues to unfold, layer by layer, year by year. So, as you rest, imagine the long history of the world as a gentle, receding tide. It leaves behind treasures on the sand for us to find, while taking others back into the deep. Both the found and the lost are part of the same ocean. The records may be clear or they may be blurred, but the human journey remains a constant, quiet presence in the background of our lives. Rest now, knowing that the story is safe, even in its silences.